Hello and welcome to the Saturday Down South podcast. Very special edition of the Saturday Down South podcast. It's time for It Just Meant More. We alluded to this last week, the series that we're going to be doing where we look back on these classic SEC games and where we rewatch these and discuss some of the things that, you know, we noticed then, the way that, you know, for you, obviously this is going to mean something a little bit different than it does for me.
I got fired up yesterday, you're right.
You got a little bit, you tapped into your Bama fandom rewatching this game. I know you did. And I'm sure a lot of people will as well listening to this. But the game that we're discussing today is the 2012 SEC Championship with Bama and Georgia. Some of the most talent we've ever seen on the field at one time in the SEC, which is saying a lot. I realize that's saying a lot, but you rewatch this game and you realize, like, holy cow, there was talent galore. And this game was the first, I mean, I don't want to say the first, but it was a de facto semifinal game before we had the playoff. At the tail end of the BCS era, we had this great game with number 2 versus number 3. The winner's going to play Notre Dame, and there was just so much on the line, and it was just everything you would ever want out of an SEC championship.
Yeah, unless you're a fan of the team that was ranked number 2 and you just want to slip into the national championship game.
Probably that. Yeah.
It was. I was excited, obviously, going into this game. It did mean a lot to me, as you know. But we talked about this whole series we want to do, and I'm excited for it because, and it's not only classic games, but it's like the most rewatchable games, like, you know, like you were saying, like a must-see movie. So when I was growing up, my dad recorded on VHS tape every single Bama game from '92 to 2003. Which I know sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but, like, you know, it wasn't like we didn't own movies at his house, so it wasn't like I wasn't not watching, like, Mighty Ducks and stuff. But, you know, for the most part, if I was bored, like, I'm gonna pop in the Bama Mississippi State game from '92, which I did before. So I'm excited for the series. This game, I did get riled up rewatching it. It was so good.
By now, everybody knows the final result. It's, you know, spoiler alert. It's
Don't tell
7 years old. You know, Bama obviously wins this classic game that just had one of the better second halves you could really ever remember. I mean, just so back and forth. You really don't know who's going to win. This great drive at the end where it looks like, you know, maybe Aaron Murray's finally going to have this moment, and ultimately it is still Bama. Bama continues this dynasty. But, you know, so what we want to do with these games, because everybody knows the result already, if you want to rewatch them with us and go back in time before, you know, you want to stop right now and rewatch this entire game and then listen to this podcast, I fully encourage you to do so.
I will give you my number if you DM me. I feel free. You won't enjoy it, but I'll do it for you.
Or if you want to listen to this podcast and then rewatch it after so you have a little bit more context going in, we recommend doing that. But rewatching this was a lot of fun, something that we both did the other day. It took a lot of time come up with. You have 6 pages of notes on this game.
That's the number I told you, but I'm not going to talk about if it's more or less. Most of it was just like rants about former players that I hated on both sides. I forgot how much I disliked some of these guys.
You got some feelings brought back in a hurry.
There was, and here's why. This game, I think, meant more so than any other games, like between Bama and Georgia, like in the recent memory. I thought this kind of exposed like the difference of the programs and coaches, and just growing up in the state. You know, it's not like it is now. I think Bama's won 5 in a row against Georgia, but they obviously don't play every year. But this is still at the point where Richt was 3-1, you know, against Bama, and I had been to, I think, 3 of those 4 games, and you know, 2 of them were like heartbreaking, like lost by 2 points, lost in overtime, and then 2003 game, which is like one of the most miserable games I've ever watched.
Before we get started here, it's worth noting that you were wearing the same exact shirt that you wore that day, but it is without sleeves now compared to then.
I sweated them off. Sweated off the sleeves.
I am
wearing the same shirt. Still got it, bro.
Yeah, no doubt whatsoever. That was the least surprising thing when we popped on. And
I thought it'd be a good idea because it's like, you know, this whole nostalgia thing and going back in time. And I was like, what if we could go back and, like, I remember being at the tailgate and find pictures or tweets. And then I realized that finding my tweets from that day would probably be a terrible idea.
Probably not the best, but we can save those for another time. Let's paint the picture a little bit, because when you go back and you listen to this game and you listen to the broadcast, you know, Vern is, of course, he's going to bring up Vern's going to bring up the 1980 national championship, the drought, which, call it what you will, but at that point it was at 32 years. And Vern had this great quote early on where he says, "You might say this is the Bulldogs' most important game since then." Yeah, I mean, because it's a semifinal game, essentially, with the winner getting to face Notre Dame in the national championship. And so, everybody in the stadium knows what's at stake for
right.
Georgia. Everybody knows kind of what's on the line for Bama, too, and trying to become the first team since 95 Nebraska to repeat national champions.
Well, and kind of going back a few weeks prior to this, people remember the Manziel game, but they don't remember what happened afterwards. And
right.
So this is, again, coming off 2 or 3 national championships. I will be 100% honest. This is, I had it in my notes, peak Bama fan, obnoxious levels. Just absolute arrogance. There's no one's going to beat us, blah, blah, blah. So after the A&M loss, I think they're on the outside looking in, but then you have that crazy night, a few weeks later. I was at a wedding that I was late for, and I was in it. Talk about that some other time. And I think, Kansas State lost to somebody, to Baylor.
With Colin Klein, right?
Yeah. And Stanford beat Oregon. So, or the other way around, either way. So Bama sneaks back in, and it's all right, well, here's the path again. And, then they have to play in this playing game for Notre Dame, which is it's like you're fighting for a bride that you don't want to marry. That is, that should not have been the end prize. And what I also forgot was Florida was 4th.
Yeah, you forget that Florida was that high at that point of the season. Georgia had gotten there by beating Florida earlier on. And, the weird thing about this game is that in the tail end of the BCS era, you hear Gary Danielson say at the top of the broadcast, "Isn't it nice that no opinions are going to matter? Just football decided between the lines the way that it was supposed to be." And it's this, this moment of being frustrated with the BCS system, frustrated that computers decided. And here we have this great game with 2 teams on a neutral site where we're really going to see a worthy team get put into that final spot for the national championship game.
Keep in mind, Notre Dame's got the week off.
Notre Dame has the week off. Obviously, it didn't have to play the conference championship, but had been undefeated to that point. And obviously, this is peak Manti Te'o talk. So,
oh my God,
that was I think this because the story came out about a month after, right?
It was 3 weeks after. Yeah, that was
3 weeks after.
That kid, that was unbelievable. Anyway, we'll keep going.
So, we want to talk about. We're going to break this down to a variety of categories, and this. What we're doing with this series is, these are almost like great movies that you can go back and rewatch. Yeah. Maybe if you're a Georgia fan, it's a movie that has a painful ending or something like that, something like A Star is Born. Spoiler alert there.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, sorry. Let's talk about the A-listers because we had very different impressions of who the A-listers were on this cast of stars. It's this star-studded game. Your list of A-listers is extremely long.
So Connor did it from a more concise point of view, I think.
Good word, concise, yeah.
I'll let you start because all I was trying to do was add in there were so many people that I think were huge impacts in their programs. Because at this point Georgia had, I remember the 2008 team obviously with AJ Green and Noshawn and Matt Stafford and all these big time recruits. This was up until this point maybe the most recruiting talent, not developed talent that Rick had on a team.
7 guys from this defense got drafted the following draft.
9 off the starting 11 were drafted, played the NFL. That's absurd. 9 of 11.
So one of those guys, one of the household names at this point was Jarvis Jones. Probably came in as the most highly touted guy on that defense coming into this game, just because of the year that he was having. Todd Gurley, of course, who was only a freshman at this time, but quickly, they realized early on, you go back and you watch this game, and they even said at the top of the broadcast, they're Gurley's going to share the backfield with Keith Marshall.
No, he's not.
Oh, wait, no, actually, he's not at all, and that's not going to be the case.
And he when I put all these extra names there for the A-listers, I talk about, it's almost these guys that have this lore or legend about them while they were there. Jones comes in, not only does he put up that ridiculous number as Defensive Player of the Year, I think, that year, but he also comes in and he caused the fumble against Florida to seal the victory late in that game, and stuff like that when you're a rival that you don't really beat as much, especially at that time, and he does something like that in that game. That's what I mean as an A-lister, Barrett Jones starting at his 3rd damn position. I'm not saying they were great pros; they were A-listers then.
Yes, A-listers then. That is how we're going to define this, and then Aaron Murray, of course, and Murray to me is probably the most interesting storyline. Murray and Richt, who Murray almost became this microcosm of Richt, and he comes in as the most efficient passer in the country, and they throw out the stat up there about 1-4 against top 10 teams. Oh, but in that game against Florida that they won, he had 3 picks in the first half. So it's still this thing that's like looming over. And, Gary Danielson had this quote where he says, Aaron Murray, he's had the disappointments, he's had some great stats, but he needs one big win to cement his career. And he said that when UGA was down in the fourth quarter, and it was like, is he going to have this big, iconic moment in college football? And it painted the scene so well because that was what a lot of the pressure was on him. Even though last year in the SEC Championship, it wasn't necessarily Aaron Murray's fault that they, were up 10-0 and then just got roasted against LSU. They had a ton of drops in that game, as they showed on the broadcast. He didn't play particularly well, but he had some help in losing that game.
Yeah, they got outscored by Tyrann Mathieu. So, I mean, that game is different. I think this whole – we look back at Aaron Murray, and I think the narrative of, even for some Georgia fans, is like, yeah, he was a good college quarterback, and we don't think that he's great despite – being the all-time leading passer in SEC history, despite, like you said, being the most efficient. I mean, I remember in this season, I never thought he was that great because, of what he did against top 10 or top 25, top 10 teams. I mean, they got boat raced against South Carolina, and I couldn't really get over that. But I mean, when you look back at it, building his legacy, we'll talk about this more towards the end. Building his legacy, what a win like this can do for you, it propels it to legendary stats. Like, look at AJ. And how average he looked in this game, but we all think man, one of the greatest college quarterbacks maybe ever because this record. And look, he was outplayed in this game.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to say that. And the crazy thing is that Murray definitely outplayed McCarron in this game, but McCarron makes the clutch throw at the end to Amari Cooper, where Amari just runs this beautiful route, and it's it's this you forget to that point for the first 3 quarters of the game, Eddie Lacy, TJ Yeldon completely carried Bama, and then McCarron comes up with this clutch throw.
Without a doubt. I mean, and also kind of peeling it back even more, they beat LSU. And in the second half, earlier in the season, in the second half, he was 1 of 8 before the final drive. This wasn't the first time he had just kind of not shown up. But, now that we look back at history, he's the champion, so we just assume that he's the greater quarterback, and it was not the case this day.
Yeah, McCarron, the Bama A-listers, they're obvious. I mean, McCarron, as we talked about, he's 26-2 as a starter to that point. Eddie Lacy was still an A-lister. He was on his way to a first-team All-SEC season. And then Barrett Jones, obviously, is the guy who was just the anchor of that line.
Yeah, and that whole offensive line was supposed to be one of the best in SEC history, and they had DJ Fluker and Chance Warmack was called the best guard in college football in the past 25 years, and he was not. Just a lot of big names, but even for Georgia, you talk about guys like Brandon Smith and a bunch of 5 stars like him, and John Jenkins was a huge recruit, that massive number 6 on the T line.
He was huge.
He was so good too, and you have Ogletree and a lot of these guys. And when I say the most talent, that's what I mean because they had so many 5 stars on this team.
And Amari too. Amari.
It
was fun to watch Amari and Gurley because this is before, and Danielson brought this up too about how. It's cool to see these freshmen having these big time moments, and TJ Yeldon obviously had an incredible game as well. But this was kind of before it was really, really popular, where you would see these true freshmen coming in and having big time impacts, especially at places that have so much talent like Georgia and Bama. To see them shine like that really kind of spoke to just how good those guys were early on.
Well, yeah, and to also see them, especially the position they played, to be better than not just the opposition, but they were just so much above the game plan from the opposite coach. I mean, you couldn't stop them. Gurley was special from the day he stepped on campus. I think he ran a kickoff return for a touchdown his first game back, had over 100 yards, all that kind of stuff. But I had never seen a Bama defense just get shredded by a running back like that. It just didn't happen.
Because he had over 100 in this game, and Bama had the streak of how many straight games was it without allowing a 100-yard rusher? I mean,
it was a bunch.
3 seasons worth or something.
At that point, it was a very big deal if it happened. It only happened once or twice since 2007, I want to say, under Saban. And, I told you when we first brought this up, the first thing I texted you, I was like, oh, yeah, Gurley was 23 carries for 122 yards.
Yeah.
But it was the fact that, when I say, they're just better than the game plan, they beat your game plan, they always just seemed like they were a step ahead. They just were gliding through, and they were always faster, stronger than every other player on the field.
The directors. Mark Richt, Nick Saban. So many great shots of them in this game that kind of define who they are as coaches, as people, all that stuff. And as you brought up before, Richt is 3-1 against Bama, but 2008, he didn't get that win against Saban's Bama. And he's playing in his 5th SEC championship. So it's not like which is crazy because I think we kind of forget that a little bit. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's half a decade's worth of SEC championships. Even Saban, it took him a while to get to 5 SEC championships because he wasn't there in 2011.
Well, this game, they hadn't been there since 2009.
Gosh, that's crazy.
You know what I mean? Like, think about the talent they had, and like they had won the national championship the year before, didn't play in the game, which I know a lot of people were not happy about. Yeah, I mean I forgot that he'd been there at 5, and for the most part, he'd won 2002, 2005. He didn't make it 2007, but that was like arguably his best team.
You could see moments in this game, too, where the mild-mannered Mark Richt was realizing what was on the line for him.
That's such a good point.
And there were a lot of points in this game where, we're going to get to the Quentin Dial hit later. I think that was one of them where he was pretty irate and, understandably so. And then even, before that happened, I think
he said heck, dude. Did you see that?
He did. He said bullcrap
no
like 2 or 3 times. Yeah,
I've never seen that emotion, like that much emotion out of him. And I think to the point you made, and I want to give you props. I said it off air. I was very impressed, very proud of you for how. I don't want to say that you were right because it's just agreeing with me, but I think you're right. Like, and I think looking back on it, you never saw that kind of emotion out of Richt. Even after like the Florida game, 2007, when the whole team runs on the field, he does that awkward getting the crowd pumped up.
But just straight face the whole time doing it.
And he was so animated several times throughout this game. And you talk about the press conference afterwards. I think he kind of felt and knew like this was his best shot.
Yep.
And I don't know how much more there was going to be, and obviously that ended up being the case.
Saban in this game, and just the entire coaching staff, the crimson shirts with the white collars.
You were really big on that.
Nothing defines... No, seriously. If you go back and look, nothing defines the early 2010s more than... It dates Bama a lot. Whenever I see Saban wearing that exact polo, I know that it's pre-playoff era.
Right.
And that it's from the early part of that decade. And I couldn't stop looking at those shirts. I'm like, why did they get rid of those? I kind of like those.
I don't know. He just looks so young and vibrant and happy until the fan base sucked the life out of him.
It's like the presidency, It takes some years off your life.
No, but you talk about the directors real quick, and I think you did say Saban didn't seem invincible yet. I think again, looking back on it, in the moment, I was like, this is a no-brainer. I remember the 2008 game. I remember saying to somebody, the reason why I like Saban over Richt. Richt's a great guy. He's super nice. But I know every single fall they have, instead of one of their practices, they surprise the team by going to have a pool day and jump off a high dive. I know when that's happening, my team's probably game planning and practicing. Also on Sundays, I'm not judging you. It's great that he's a very strong Christian man. I'm just saying Saban's probably not in church. He's probably watching game tape. And so it seemed like there was this big difference. They are obviously different in personality and coaching style. But I didn't give enough credit to Richt, I think, because he was those 3-1, those wins were big, and the five SEC championship games. Jesus,
why Mark Richt's faith is ruining his status as a coach. My column.
You heard it here first.
But that was something I picked up on too. That I think rewatching it, you would notice this more than if you were, looking back. Obviously, we know the final result of this, and we know just how invincible Saban really was during that stretch, and that continued later on. But even in year 6, with those 2 titles already, maybe it was because they were 3 weeks removed from losing to a redshirt freshman in Johnny Manziel.
Okay, maybe there was that. He won the Heisman that year, but
right. I mean, there's obviously there's something to be said for that, but it didn't feel. You didn't go into this game thinking, okay, Bama's just this dominant force, and it's going to take this unbelievable effort from Georgia. And maybe part of that, obviously, is the talent that we saw on Georgia's side. On Georgia's side, where we said, okay, these guys actually stack up well, but at the same time, Bama was a very slight favorite in this game. It wasn't like they were a touchdown favorite or something like that.
So I did not have that thought process going in. I thought we were going to dominate them. I was not worried about Georgia at all. I did not take them seriously because, again, when I'd seen them in big time moments, they didn't just lose. 35-7 at South Carolina. And they'd only played, I think, 2 ranked teams the whole year. They didn't look great for most of the year. I did not take them very seriously. And to be fair, I had this whole idea that Bama was just this unstoppable force. They were the greatest dynasty ever. That team was so much worse than the 2011 team, looking back at it, on defense especially. And I feel like going into it, I didn't give near enough credit to what Georgia was able to do.
Yeah, one of the things they didn't talk about was they didn't have that dude who was just a pass rusher who was going to get after the quarterback. You know, it was going to be more of a team effort. Yeah, Bama didn't have that guy. There wasn't the Marcel Darius, that type of person in the middle of the defense. And the secondary might have had a couple issues here and there, but which is atypical for a Saban coached unit. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, it's kind of strange that we really didn't know just how good this Bama dynasty was going to be at that point. This was a bit of a crossroads for that. And, obviously you still have the 2 titles in the last 3 years, which, that accomplishment is something that very, very few programs could say in the history of college football. But, at the same time, you're kind of looking at this like, how good is this team going to be? Can they reach an even higher ceiling at this point?
Right. And I think the narrative had already been kind of built. And maybe unfairly, like the Georgia, even if they have the talent, maybe they don't win the big game. But trying to be objective and fair about that, Bama has and Saban had like the fortune of the year before not making it to the SEC championship game, and they were the best team in the country that year and still winning the national championship. You look at Rick's 2007; they had those 2 early losses. He doesn't get into the SEC championship game. There's no doubt in my mind that they probably would have won the national championship in 2007 if they got in. So there's just so many small things that happen over the course of time that like could change so many big picture things, and I think especially at the time, and I was being a huge homer and a fan that day, I was full on biased. Like there's no stopping Bama in this game.
Did you get into the stadium that day, or what was that situation? Because you
so yeah, I was tailgating with a bunch of my Georgia friends outside the stadium. This is the first time I'd been back to this SEC championship game since I sold my car to go in 2009.
Great story.
And I was like, I'm not gonna go. I'm trying to be responsible. I'm just gonna go enjoy the game somewhere at home, not around people. Then I kept drinking at the tailgate and decided to pull out like $600 in cash in downtown Atlanta, which was a great move. At like a gas station, like right behind the Georgia Dome. Which, do you have any idea how long the process is taking $600 out at a gas station ATM?
Yeah, I was gonna say you can't do that in ATM.
Yeah, somebody just robbed me right now. Like I'm gonna get a 6-pack of Bud Light and I'm gonna pull out about $8,000. And I remember walking towards the stadium and I was like, I'm gonna buy a ticket, and I think it was like around $500 for like upper deck. I was like, you know what? Maybe not, Chris. Maybe just carry this large wad of cash home with you.
So you went home and watched the game responsibly by yourself?
Yeah. I watched it with a bunch of friends at my buddy's house. But I didn't do a good job of preparing because I got so into the tailgate and I thought I was going to go into the game that we got in that awkward limbo where it was too late to go. I didn't want to go to a bar. It was too late to we missed the first drive. I had to listen on the radio. And then we were I wasn't in my comfort zone is what I'm saying. I like to be away from everybody, and I was in a crowd of people. It was very uncomfortable.
Which explains why Bama got off to a very, very slow start in this game. And that's the weird thing, too, is if you just watch the first half of this game, not a classic. It had more shades of 2011 Bama LSU, and then the second half just followed a totally different tone where it's just back and forth, lead changes, big-time plays here and there, and it's just that's when it turned into a classic game. Because I think if it had followed the first half script for the rest of the way, college football fans would have been so upset.
Coming off of what happened in 2011?
Yep.
That would have been awful. Yeah, I mean, we have one of the topics in here. We'll get into it more later, but it was about what's the biggest thing you forgot about rewatching this game? The first half.
First half was bad. It was bad.
And it was 10-7 at the half, and Bama, they had to score, what was it? They scored with less than 2 minutes to go to tie it up and then kick the field goal at the end of the first half. It was 7-0 for 28 minutes.
Yeah. So let's continue on with the cast here, because this is the one that we had the toughest time figuring out. The breakout performers. And the example that I used for this was 2010 Bama, South Carolina, where Alshon Jeffrey just has that unbelievable game. And Kerry Danielson had said, that was kind of what we were following, but we realized there really wasn't that guy for this game because everybody who was really good had already been good. So the one that I came up with was TJ Yeldon, just because Yeldon, yes, as you mentioned, 5-star true freshman, had the big debut, but what he did in this game with 150 rushing yards, which at that point was his career high, and then late in this game with 4 minutes left, Bama turned to him instead of Eddie Lacy, and part of that might have been because Lacy was banged up, but Yeldon was really, really good. With 4 minutes left, he had that run where it's 3rd and 5, and it's a huge moment in this game.
Hold on, don't just. Oh man, this is the best play of the game. Love it. Go on.
This is like peak Bama being who they were in this era. This offensive identity, just kind of, we're going to beat you at the line of scrimmage. We don't care what it takes. Yeah. 3rd and 5 with 4 minutes left, and Bama's down 3. And they decide, you know what? We're going to hand it off to a true freshman tailback. And TJ Yeldon just runs right through Sean Williams and lands forward and picks up the first down, extends the drive. Just an unbelievable moment in that game to make that call and to put the trust in TJ Yeldon to come up with that first down.
Well, and we're going to get much, much more in depth with that play and why it was so important. And I think the biggest, it was the most symbolic representation of where each program was at and who each team truly was in this game. And we'll talk more about it later because Sean Williams had a bunch of stuff earlier in the year about the whole, we can't play soft. And after he had called out this defense, we'll get into it later.
Let's get into it right now because that's okay.
So this is not my breakout performer, but this is the most important play of the game, and this is why going into this game, like I said, I didn't take UGA as seriously, and there was a point I always viewed UGA as a lot of talk, and not trying to be harsh to UGA fans, but it seems like every August this is our year, and they don't always back that up. And I remember Sean Williams had this quote after the Kentucky game. They get killed by South Carolina. They barely beat Kentucky. And he calls out the defense. He's like, we can't be soft. And he called the defense soft. And the whole, team kind of rallied around it. All the fans did. And ever since that moment, they had the number 1 scoring defense in the country. Before that game, they were giving up 25 points a game. After that, it was 8. They had the number 1 defense in the country from October 25th on. They were giving up less than 300 yards a game, which was 75 less than before. And they had 15 turnovers in the final 5 games. They were dominant after he'd called out this team, but it was this whole bravado of they'd done it earlier in the season with the grown man football thing at Mizzou, which I didn't like because Mizzou had 6 offensive linemen out that game. It just seemed like it was a facade of them.
They were beating up on weaker opponents.
Well, no, it's like them beating their chest. It's like people say to me all the time, you look strong. I'm not. I'm just big. That's it. It was a false impression they were giving off. Whereas on the other hand, that's how Bama was built, out of this toughness and being more mentally tough, more physically tough than any other team in the SEC or country. And Sean Williams doing that, and he talked a lot of trash during games. Him and Bakari Rambo both. And Bakari Rambo was a good player for Georgia.
All-time name. All-time.
Yeah, the perfect name ever for. And maybe that's why I got so offended by his play in this game. But when you're the key voice to call out people for being soft, and you're getting, this happened all game. Missed tackles, refusing. Bakari Rambo, at one point, Gary Danielson said he almost looked like he didn't want it. He was
on that long Lacy run. Yeah.
And so and that's when the whole part of the game changed for me. But this play, I thought, just summed up who both teams really were, because the drive before, it's 3rd and 6, and they attempted a pass. It was this 1 of 6 in the second half. AJ was not on point. So the next drive, it's 3rd and 5, similar down in distance. They had not converted a third down between 4 and 7 yards the entire game out of I think 6 attempts. And they ran a true freshman off right tackle. Just right at your defense, right at Jarvis Jones. And Sean Williams makes contact with him a yard past the line of scrimmage, and Yeldon is able, as a true freshman, is able to drag him across the first down marker, and then the next play is the bomb to Amari Cooper. There's no better way to sum up. Don't talk about it, just be about it.
And that's the thing too that I think we came to expect from Bama. It was, they did this better than anybody in the country, where it didn't matter. Saban wasn't worried about scheming. That was before Lane Kiffin came along, and he didn't have to come up with these crazy ways to run this, this up-tempo, spread it out offense. And that was when Bama was truly at its, we're going to punch you in the mouth, and we don't care if you know exactly what's coming. I'll stick a true freshman back there. I don't care, and I'll put my best under your best, and we feel like we're going to win every single time. And that instance right there was such a key point in that game to show that.
And again, I'm not discrediting how good this defense was. They not only with the names, I just told you all of the stats they had put up for the second half of the season. They were a good defense, but when you are supposed to be that dominant defense and you're walking in with this swag and bowing your chest out and all that kind of stuff, and you give up, you not just get beat, you give up over 500 yards of total offense and 352 yards rushing. 352 yards rushing.
SEC championship record at that point, yeah.
Yeah, there was a stat that said Saban was 48-0 when his team rushed for 150 yards or more. They had 152 in the first half, and which is impressive. But like what they were able to do in the second half, which was just there was no question what the game plan was. It was like we're going to hand the ball off. That's all we're going to do into like the teeth of your defense, which again has 9 players that are going to be drafted off the starting 11.
You went in a different direction for your other breakout star, but pretty much in this, I guess, in a very similar. You view this in a very similar way that I did. You had Eddie Lacy as your other breakout star for this game, and you explained it because I looked at that on the surface. I'm like, well, he was an All SEC player.
Right.
This was right before he went to the draft, so it's not so much a breakout game as much as it is like a here I am having my best moment on a national stage type game.
Yeah, and so the reason I think we have like looking back on it at the time, like you look back at it now and it's like, yeah, he's an All SEC player. He did pretty well his first 2 seasons, I guess, in the NFL. Like, we know what kind of back he was. He was special because of this game and what he did in the national championship game. But before this game, he didn't have any huge stats. Obviously played behind Trent, obviously played behind Ingram. But you're coming off of Ingram winning the first ever Heisman in school history, and then Trent, who we all thought was like the best running back ever, like to come through Bama. No one, I don't think, as a Bama fan, it's not that we didn't think he was good. It just he wasn't that elite Bama back that we were used to. And then you have a guy like Yeldon coming in as like this highly touted 5-star, goes off for 100 yards in his first game. I mean, Lacy didn't have a lot of huge games before this. And the reason I think he's a breakout star is because he was the MVP of this game with 20 carries and 181 yards. And then he was the MVP of the national championship game. And that's what really, I think, boosted his career and kind of like solidified his career and like made it as memorable. Because before that, I don't think he was really given as much credit as maybe he deserved.
I think this is going to be a weird take. This is like the white collar on the crimson polo take, but his number is 42. How many great running backs with numbers in the 40s can you think of off the top of your head that just like
Jackie
looked
Robinson.
that way? Yeah, just the Jackie Robinson. I thought we retired 42, but that was one of the things I had noticed. I'm watching him, and I'm like, and everybody kind of had this gasp when he would have the burst through the line of scrimmage. Like, a guy that big should not be moving that quickly. And it would just surprise people about how quickly he was able to accelerate with that kind of power. And I know that Lacy kind of... Oh, gosh,
it wasn't even on display in this game.
But he had this agility, though, where he could do things in the open field, and he ran downhill so well, where I think a lot of people have lumped Eddie Lacy into this guy who, he had weight issues when he got to the NFL, and he didn't necessarily live up to this potential.
Who doesn't, Connor?
But I think people almost put this Bama bust label on him. But
Yeah.
to see why we viewed Eddie Lacy in such a high regard, it wasn't just that he was playing behind a really good offensive line.
No,
Some of the stuff that he did in the open field was just ridiculous.
No, completely agree. And I just don't think before. You also have to keep in mind that like that running back group, throw out Kenyon Drake, who was a freshman. They had 2 5-stars that were like top 15 players, like the number 1 all-purpose back. I think 2 years in a row with Brent Callaway and D. Hart, who never amounted to anything. They never even finished their career at Bama. But no one really thought that Lacy was going to really be the guy. Like he had some good numbers because he was like, he was behind a good offensive line, but like, I mean, good numbers as like a backup role. But yeah, I mean, I think Yeldon honestly he benefited way more from this offensive line than Lacy did because Yeldon had his best season at Bama as a freshman.
Right, which he gets into the situation where he has to share the backfield with Derrick Henry too, and it's tough. It's tough if you're TJ Yeldon to be a 5-star recruit who has this great freshman season where you get over 1,000 yards, you get the true freshman rushing record, and then it's like, oh yeah, but you're still gonna share this, and you're never gonna be the 250 carry, 300 carry type guy that ultimately Derrick Henry gets to be. The prominent extras in this,
I forgot
prominent
about
extras. We define this as a guy who was on the sideline who didn't play in this game or played very little in this game, who went on to become a stud. But you wouldn't know by watching this game that this person was even there. And Georgia and Bama are great because obviously we've talked about the depth and the depth chart having all these 5-star guys. And there were a few that you could point to, but the guy that I brought up was Landon Collins, just because
I forgot he was even on that team.
Exactly.
I got mad when you put it in there. I had to go double check. I was like, he wasn't even on this team, Connor.
He was a true freshman on this team, but when you have a secondary that's got D. Milner, Clinton Dix, like your playing time is going to be pretty limited. And he was just basically on special teams as a true freshman, which is crazy to think about with the career that he had. And there have been great freshman defensive backs at Bama, of course, but having somebody like Landon Collins, who's just not even a factor in a game like this, just shows you the talent that was on the field that day.
Does it? Because I don't understand why he wasn't. I feel like we could have used him. I feel like we definitely could have used him.
So I saw that he went back and he said, like, I needed to sit as a freshman. Like, Kirby sat me down and basically said, you're going to look lost. You're going to be kind of all over the place. And this is why I'm going to sit you down, as talented as you are. Yeah. And he said that actually benefited him a lot. So take that for what it is.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it just, and again, like the drop off from that 2011 defense to this 2012 defense, and they led the country like for the at the end of the season in, I think, scoring defense. I don't know about total defense, but God, they were not as good.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a different type of feel for that Bama defense. Did you have any that you wanted to add here?
I took him out.
On Kenny Drake.
I took him out. I mean,
okay.
I still am like blown away because I had like 17 tabs up like looking through this game last night because I forgot. Like, I mean, Gurley was a true freshman and like Keith Marshall was the higher rated back coming out. They had just gotten Isaiah Crowell like the year or two prior to that.
But he was hurt for this game.
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't the better back. I don't know how much he would have played.
Yeah.
So, but it's just crazy how much talent they had, and like the amount of like 5-star offensive linemen in this game with John Theus, who's a huge recruit, and DJ Fluker, who's just he's just a massive human being.
Before we get to the story arc of this game, how this game played out, a lot of the emotions that you had, let's take a quick break to talk about our Facebook group. If you are listening to this, you should definitely already be a member of our Facebook group, the SDS Podcast on Facebook. It is a private group, so you can request access. Marler lets you in. What are the type of things that you're going to get if you join a Facebook group? Well, you're going to see like pictures of Marler from 2012 watching this game where he's at the tailgate and he looks super nervous, but he's probably a bit buzzed watching it, but that's okay. You can get all sort of discussion. We have a lot of fun with this Facebook group. Marler has done a really good job organizing it and kind of facilitating some interesting questions. So if you want a new place to talk about college football, you want something a little bit more social, interactive with us, make sure that you join our Facebook group. That's the Saturday Down South Podcast on Facebook. Search it, request access. We will let you in, and let's have some fun. Let's talk about the story that really was this game. There are a lot of different things that we're going to get into. But the first thing, I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this. Just in all of these, it just meant more. The favorite line from the broadcast. You know, with Gary and Vern, there are some good ones. There are some gems.
My goodness.
I miss Vern so much. I mean,
that turtle laugh, man.
It's unbelievable. Some of his just audible gasp are so perfect. This was a great Vern moment. I don't know if you picked up on this. So this was in the first quarter after Georgia executes that perfect fake punt.
They did a fake punt.
Yeah, they did a fake. Both teams were doing fakes. It was crazy.
That's like almost the same play they ran this past year. That was like, it was awesome. It worked.
But it worked. But they didn't try and have their quarterback run on 4th and 11. It was a little bit different.
I mean, I wasn't trying to throw him under the bus. I thought it was cool. I was like, oh yeah, well, another game with a fake punt.
Nostalgia. So they're coming off the commercial break after they had run this, and Gary gets into this like great breakdown of how Georgia recognized that this Bama player. This Georgia player like wasn't eligible, but Bama thought he was, and that was what allowed them to get this perfect read to want to audible into this fake punt at what looked like a key moment of this game early on. And so, he just finishes this breakdown that lasts like a minute, which is kind of a long time coming off a commercial break. And then Vern goes, and let's take another look at the play from the Avis, and then he pauses. And then Gary interrupts him and goes, that was the Avis cam. And then Vern just goes, we're here to help each other.
That's beautiful.
It was such a perfect moment between those two that just everything you could ever think about Vern was just described in that one sequence.
It reminded me of like a couple, and they're like someone's like ignoring the other one, and just be like, oh yeah, totally. Like, did you hear anything I just said? Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's crazy. That was not my favorite quote, but that was good. That was good. See, I like that you did this for this one and for the South Carolina one. That was like a good Vern quote. Like, people give Gary Danielson a lot of crap. I love this.
I think he's good at what he does.
I really do too.
I think he's smart, and I think he recognizes things that I would never be able to pick up on during a game.
Yeah.
Like that receiver they thought was covered, and he wasn't, and that's why they audibled them. I would never look at that play. I would just be like, yeah, they felt the need to take a risk at that point, and they got lucky.
I don't like the way he says unbalanced line. He says it a lot, but other than that, I like him a lot. My favorite quote was, Vernon Gary brought this up, I think in like the start of the fourth quarter, and they had an interview with Saban. He said, "Whoever runs the ball best will win this game." And Saban said that at the start of the third quarter, which was like, pretty prophetic. I'm about to have a heart attack here also in the post-game interview.
Yeah, Saban was
that was good.
Which that's saying a lot coming from him. Yeah. Along the same lines of the Saban quote of "Whoever runs the ball best will win the game." The coldest take from the broadcast. Man. These are fun. I've looked really, really closely. Like, this might have been the thing that I actually paid the most attention to. I was looking for the one thing that was just going to be like, okay, this aged horribly. Yeah, just to tell you, no, you're wrong. I know what happens. I've seen the future. So Gary, when UGA is up 7-0 early in the second quarter, this was his quote: "Biggest storyline of the game so far. Alabama's offensive line has not been the difference."
Well, at the time they were, but yeah, that did not age well.
That did not age well after Bama set the SEC championship rushing record, 350 on the ground. Yeah, probably should have waited a little bit. It just seemed a little bit premature at that point to be like, oh, Bama's just getting, they're not dominating at the line of scrimmage, and this is bad. And like, okay, let's give it a little bit of time.
I think we had come accustomed to assuming that offensive line again was going to be just pushing anyone around. John Jenkins was so big.
That guy was, even for a nose tackle, you look at him, he even next to Barrett Jones, you're like, oh my gosh, Barrett Jones is like an infant compared to this guy.
Barrett Jones played really well against him. DJ Fluker did not.
There were a lot of different moments in that game where they would point out whenever Barrett Jones would struggle, which I think that's part of being a household name. But whenever he got beat at the line of scrimmage, it seemed like they would point that out on the broadcast and be like, look at Barrett Jones not being able to handle Jenkins here, or like, whatever it was. It was like, all right, dude's an All-American. He can have a couple plays here and there where he's not, performing at his
He's also like a perfect example of like that one college guy that we give way too much love to. Like, because he's like a 4.0 student, and he plays all these different positions, and it's like he's a great guy, and he's got a comb over. Where's Cat?
Pushes AJ McCarron in the national championship.
That was awesome. But it was like one of those things, too, where you're like, oh, maybe he's not that great. Like, he's not going to be a NFL player for the next 15 years.
Another great cold take.
Thank you for doing this.
So Tim Brando cuts in. Tim Brando was doing, the updates, during the middle of the game, and they would cut into a highlight of a different game.
Right.
So I'm going to tell you the quote before I tell you who it's about. "He may not be a Heisman candidate this year, but maybe there's one in his future." Tim Brando said that about a freshman, Kevin Hogan. Yes, the Stanford quarterback, who I think we can say didn't come anywhere close to winning a Heisman Trophy.
First off, Stanford doesn't have freshman quarterbacks ever. They always have a fifth-year senior quarterback. We've talked about this.
But he was the rare case, so that's why he was so special.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because one of my favorite parts about like rewatching these games, and and even back in the day on those like VHS tapes I told you about, is it's cool to kind of look back in time and see what was going on. Like they were showing like one of the highlights was between Rutgers and
Louisville.
Louisville. I was like, Louisville's going to be back in the Orange Bowl, and they're going to be facing their future ACC brethren. And I was like, wait, what is happening right now? And like Rutgers was like 9-3 or something like that. Yeah, Brando he's something else. I'll say my coldest take was, and this ended up being huge. When Bama scored to make it 21-16 in the third quarter, and they go for two, and I was screaming this at the TV. Gary Danielson said, "It's awful early to be chasing a point, in my opinion. Pull within 4. If UGA kicks a field goal, you're only down 7 points. So instead of going for 2, just kick the field goal because you're only down 4. That way, when you stop UGA, which we hadn't been able to do in the second half, you'd only be down 7 points." And I agree with them. And then we later found out that Saban's just a genius, and it was absolutely,
huge in that game.
Absolutely brilliant. Because when you think about it, like, they won by 4, that whole last drive doesn't even happen if we're up by 3.
Because wasn't it Yeldon? 2. Yeah, Yeldon had, they just ran the ball with Yeldon, too.
We'll go back into it. Like, that drive, I think, was the most important drive of the game. I think we're going to talk about it here in a little while. But yeah, they had... That drive was 4 plays, 62 yards. All 4 plays went to Yeldon for 62 yards rushing, and he got the 2-point conversion.
It was just, okay, you're not going to be able to stop us. This is how good we're feeling. And
that's they were down 21-10. That's when they decided apparently to start. Like, they ran the first play of that drive, I remember, and I thought this was the turning point of the game. You go down 21-10, Alec Ogletree runs that blocked
kickback, yep.
And we've talked about this. That game seemingly took forever. And I felt like in the third quarter, even rewatching it, like, no time came off the clock. Like, every time I looked up, I was like, how are there still 13 minutes left? How is there 12 minutes? And then all of a sudden, you know, I feel like this is the point Bama's going to probably come back, and they block that field goal, and Alec Ogletree's running it. Like, I felt like he was running it right into my heart. Like, he's just coming right at you.
Because it was right up the gut between the hashes.
Yeah, and he's just like coming like right at the screen. You're like, oh my God. It was one of the most defeating feelings I've had as a Bama fan. Like a reality check that's like might not play out well. And then you look up, it's like, oh, all of a sudden there's 6 minutes left. Like, where the hell did the last 5 minutes go? Because I know it didn't take that long to run it in. But like, after that drive is when they decided to, like, you know, really commit to the run game. And DJ Fluker's like stomping his feet back to the huddle after the first play of the drive, like, run behind me, and they did. And the rest,
follow me to freedom.
I don't think he said that, but like, also he had huge feet. I imagine how tough it would have been to be stomping like that, size 19 feet.
Don't get under those feet.
No, yeah, but I thought that was the coldest take. And then also Gary saying 15 seconds, they're gonna get 2 throws to the end zone here.
Oh,
that sucks, man.
You know, and it's a shame because that last drive with Murray, where, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, with the tip pass where his guy catches it, and in the moment you're kind of just like, okay, yeah, he's gonna have a chance, and then quickly even the Bama players realize right away time is ticking away, 6 seconds left, and they don't have any timeouts. He's in bounds, and you realize right as soon as he goes down, it's over, and they're not going to get those 2 plays, and it's just going to be the one play where it's a tip pass, and the guy who wasn't even the intended receiver ends up catching it.
Well, and like, there's a lot that was actually behind the scenes with that play, like a story of like how that whole thing unfolded, and like Geno Smith was a true freshman, was supposed to blitz off the corner. That's the call that Kirby Smart made. C.J. Mosley gets to the line, sees it. He has no idea what's going on. Geno Smith does not know that he's supposed to be blitzing, like didn't get the play call right. So C.J. Mosley blitzes, like, you know, audibles himself. He's the one that gets his hand up. And man, poor Chris Conley. Like that like, there he gets so much flack for people like, why did he just drop the ball?
Because, yeah, and I watched that like 4 different times where he didn't, you don't realize in that moment. And he's actually
trained his whole life to catch a ball.
And he actually makes this really, like, it almost even was like he didn't even process the adjustment that he made because he had his hands up because it's supposed to be, it looks like it's supposed to probably be a back shoulder throw. I can't remember the receiver that was right behind him. He probably would have had a good chance. It would have been a tight window, but it looks like a pretty good throw just from the angle that we saw. And so when it gets tipped and his hands are up, and he just kind of naturally brings his arms down because there's a ball coming, and he doesn't realize that he's got a defender like that's still probably about a yard away from him, maybe a couple feet. I don't know what it was.
Geno Smith.
But you always think that you're going to be able to turn the corner and get to the end zone. So in that moment, I give him absolutely no fault whatsoever for catching that. Everybody in hindsight could look at that and say, "Oh, you obviously, yeah, if he could do it over again, he'd drop the ball." Yeah. But still, I don't give him any. That was just a bad situation, awkward situation. That, I mean, it's a 21-year-old kid. Like, what do you expect?
Right. And so, like, the whole aftermath of that, like I was telling you off air, is like C.J. Mosley comes in and you have this very awkward celebration, like. It's like almost like they just like ridden a roller coaster and like, oh, like screaming the whole time, like, oh, is it done? Is it done? Like, and then they can celebrate. Mm-hmm. And you have this like very awkward few seconds and this like moment of like elation. Everyone's celebrating, and you see Geno Smith awkwardly put his hands up over Conley and is like starts like jogging towards the center to celebrate, and C.J. Mosley pulls him aside and is just berating him, like in the celebration. And he's like, don't you ever, blah, 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 like just like cussing him out. And like I remember him saying, like, I'm not going to have some freshman that doesn't know what he's doing cost me a national championship. And it was like one of the most surreal but also Sabanized moments, I feel like, for Bama, because it was like you're in the middle of this incredible game and you still have your Mike linebacker, your alpha, screaming that somebody, like, the instructions were wrong.
This category, we call it the Jadeveon Clowney reminder that normal human beings don't play this sport. There were a few in this game. The one that immediately jumped out to me was in the first quarter, Amari catches this quick hitch.
Oh, yeah.
They throw this, like, it's just at the line of scrimmage, and they recognize they got one-on-one coverage with him, and it's like Jerry Jeudy before Jerry Jeudy did it, where he just absolutely breaks ankles, and he puts his foot in the ground and makes this cut that you're just like, okay, I don't know how I'd be able to tackle that in a phone booth. I don't think I could. And they ran the exact same play on the next time, and he only ended up getting like a yard or two out of it or whatever. But that was, so to me, like, that was the first moment where you're like, all right, this guy he's on a different level than any other receiver that's in this game. And then the play that really jumps out to me, when he jumped off one foot and soared over Bakari Rambo on that bomb that McCarron threw. Basically, it was like the only good play that McCarron had.
I can't jump off 2 feet, so I don't really get
the jumping off 1 foot thing was just how much he exploded in that moment. And Rambo looked like he had great position on that play to potentially make that pick. And Cooper's just like, no, I'm more athletic than you are in this moment. I'm just going to take it because this is mine now.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, obviously, that whole hitch play, it's amazing me looking back. Like, I don't understand how we had an offense that was like a passing offense at all, because he didn't have a lot of help around him.
No, he really didn't.
And, like, you know, I didn't say he wasn't like the breakout player or anything, because he almost had 1,000 yards that year and put up some big games. But I mean, like, yeah, he was the only option for AJ, just the only option. And I think when you talk about like the freak athlete, that last play where he beats Damian Swann off the line, and Damian Swann was a very highly rated recruit that was down to Bama in Georgia, and then just like decelerates during the route.
Because the adjustment that he makes on the ball was unbelievable,
and you could tell he didn't give any thought to it. It's just like his body, just natural instincts. I'm a better athlete than you. But the other one is Gurley, man.
Yeah, Gurley was freakish.
And like you watch him, and it looks almost identical to what you have seen him do. No matter how old he is, no matter what stage he's on. And I just kept thinking, I was like, he's a freshman, and like, again, that you have that whole mindset of that Bama defense that doesn't give up any of these huge rushing yards. And he's just absolutely gashing them.
The DeAndre Swift comparisons to Gurley, I don't know if they're... I think Gurley, like looking back, Gurley might be a little bit more versatile, the way that he just handled contact, even at that point of his career. And that's, we love DeAndre Swift. Like, I think he's one of the best running backs in the country right now coming back. And maybe you could probably make the case that Swift was a bit more devastating, I think. Like, could just leave somebody in the dust in a way that... Yeah. That Swift was a little bit more devastating than Gurley, and like he would do these things like we talked about with Cooper. Yeah, just one cut and go. Where Gurley was just like a little bit more tactical, and he could kind of run through you. But
he could do or run by you.
But just the all around ability that you saw from him as a true freshman watching this game, you're like, oh my gosh, like how good is this guy gonna be?
He wasn't even the most highly ranked recruit or running back recruit on that team.
It's unbelievable. It's not even fair.
Yeah.
I think that Sony and Chubb played in the same team. I mean, it's just...
And Marshall ran like a 4.29 or something crazy. Like they're definitely running back you.
Speaking of that, the Trent Richardson, I can't believe they didn't make it in the NFL. So you got mad when I put this guy on there, and I'll explain this in a way that makes a little bit more sense. So Bakari Rambo, who did not have the best day, was the Georgia safety who was a captain on this team. Early in this game, I'm watching it. I'm like, This dude is unreal. This guy who comes in and makes this pass breakup on Cy Jones, where he basically puts his head on the ball. Like, that was on his NFL draft film, no doubt in my mind whatsoever. And he was coming off this Defensive Player of the Week award.
Against Georgia Tech.
Yeah, where like he was really good. And he had these great moments for this team, but you kind of saw a little bit as the game wore on, and you texted me later on. You're like, I can't believe that you put him in this category because you saw what he looked like against NFL talent, and sure enough, he's a 6th-round pick, and he only lasted, he was only active until 2016, so he only had a brief cup of coffee. He was actually a starter early on in his NFL career, but then he was benched 2 games in, and it was a performance issue where he would have these moments, and maybe he was just one of those guys where he'd have flashes, but the lows were too low, and you saw a few of them in this game.
So I thought he was the biggest liability on the field, hands down. He was terrible, and I got so mad again because the whole bravado thing with him and Sean Williams, and maybe part of his last name was Rambo. You know what I mean? Like
it's so good.
If somebody was just named like The Rock and was my safety, I'd be like, yeah, you better be the best player ever.
And Bakari's a great first name too.
Like, it is.
If he was just Mike Rambo, I don't know if that's as good, but Bakari Rambo is like, man, that's
Mike Rambo. Mike Rambo's really good. That guy lives in Arkansas for sure.
You could put anything with Rambo and it's gonna sound good.
Yeah, Cornelius Rambo. No, but there was like, I thought you were basing it off of like this game, because we talked about like the Trent. Like I remember watching the game against South Carolina. I was like, man, he was so good. How did he not? I know he didn't have a huge impact, but it's like, how did he not make it to the NFL? Rambo was a good career player, but in this game, it wasn't just like in coverage or he did this wrong. It was the one-on-one moments with the running backs where he just absolutely refused to bring his arms to tackle at any point. And it seemed like there was a couple of Georgia safeties that would do that with like Sean Jones and stuff like that. And then he was like the next in line. And Gary Danielson said in the third quarter after Lacy has this big 32-yard run, he says Rambo almost turns it down. Like just refuse to tackle him.
It was weird. Because he got him on like the second efforts on that play, but
yeah, barely. It's like he just edged him out of bounds.
He just pushed him out of bounds. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, him, for sure.
The other guy, Jarvis Jones, and this one, he's tough to put on here because he retired. Medical reasons, all that. But when he's drafted by the Steelers in 2013, he's a first-round pick, and you're thinking, all right, this guy's going to be in the NFL for the next decade, and he's going to be the next great Steeler linebacker. I kind of forgot the way that his career started, where he had that. He started at USC.
He's from Georgia.
He was from Georgia, and then transferred back home after he couldn't get medically cleared to play at USC, and had those issues early on. And he wasn't playing very much as a true freshman, but then has this renaissance where he came on so strong as an upperclassman at Georgia, and he leaves. You said even before, like he entered the year as like one of the least touted players on that defense. And by the time this game came around, it was like Jarvis Jones, top of the scouting report. You need to watch this guy. And we saw what he did against McCarron early on, where he forces the fumble, and you're just like,
he's everywhere.
How is Bama going to stop this guy?
The only way they could was just put 2 tight ends on him, apparently, and just like run right at him. Because I mean, to be fair, he was nullified in this game because we couldn't pass the ball. Like, we had 6 passes,
and they ran right at him. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not what he was built for. He was. It's crazy looking back, like how incredible of a single season he had that year, and in so many big moments in games.
He had 19 and a half tackles for loss in the regular season.
Did he have like 13 sacks? Yeah, it's crazy. He had this game against Florida was one of the most dominant performances by oh man, it was incredible.
You had 2 others here from Bama. It's tough, but I kind of see where you're going. We already hit on Lacy, but Milner is the one that, I mean.
This was the peak Bama bust season.
Yeah, it kind of was.
Well, I mean, and Milner was he was a 5-star recruit that was like he's the number 1 or 2 cornerback in the country, and was had all the physical tools you would think, and like in the national championship game, he just put him on an island with Tyler Eifert, because that was Notre Dame's best receiver, and he shut him down. He was an All-American, unanimous All-American.
I would hope you were able to cover a tight end. I mean, I would hope.
But I'm saying he was their only offensive threat, and he was like 6'5", and like Milner shut him down. I mean, he shut everyone down that year. Like he had like 19 pass breakups. A unanimous All-American was just quick.
Can you think about how the bobbled pass at the end that it looked like he picked off, that everybody, Bama sideline is celebrating that last play where it looks like Milner has this unbelievable interception that's going to end the game, and they review it and overturn it and actually call it an incomplete pass. Like if Georgia had gone on to win that game, and how many people would look back on that moment from Milner's career and just think, oh man, what could have been right then and there. Dude, if that play had just gone his way.
I've never celebrated so hard and been so let down shortly afterwards.
I was going to ask you about that because I assumed you were going crazy.
Oh my god! Because I just wanted it to end. I just wanted it to be over. I was so tired of this. There's so many times I thought we were like going to put the game away, and then we just couldn't. And the emotional swings. It felt like this game was like directed by Tom Rinaldi. Like it's just like
it really was.
Then guess what happens? Like stop! I just want to go to bed. Yeah, I mean that's not as good as Jarvis Jones, obviously, but yeah. If I had to pick another guy, it'd be him, I guess.
This game, heads up, if you are rewatching this, I rewatched this game, the full game on YouTube that has the commercials cut out, and it was still over 3 hours.
Dude.
That's crazy long.
I got excited to watch last night with Allie because she said she wanted to watch it. I don't know if she was lying. So we sat there and I had my notes out, and we started the second half at 8 o'clock, and she missed the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter because it was still going on.
If you're a Georgia fan, this is like rewatching the Titanic.
But just the hour-long murder scene, or death scene. Murder scene.
Way too soon. Okay, you knew we were going to get to this. This might be our most heated discussion. We'll see. The thing that you didn't know / remember until rewatching this game. Okay.
I'll start. It was 10-7 in the first half. I forgot about that. And then UGA penalties.
Oh, just how bad it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first half was miserable, and the UGA penalties under Mark Richt. I forgot that that Bama had a chance to prevent that final drive from even happening. I forgot that there was a drive in between after the bomb to Amari Cooper. They stopped Georgia, and it was 3rd and 18. They get off the field, get the ball back
because they had the sack on first down,
right.
And it was it's 4th and 18 on the their own inside their own 15 or whatever it was. You can't go for it here. Yeah, that was that could have been the dagger, but then credit Georgia because they went down and they stopped Bama on the next possession to be able to get the ball back and even have a last ditch effort.
Here you go.
How did the Quentin Dial hit on Aaron Murray not get flagged? So, okay, a couple of things to keep in mind because I feel like in the heat of the moment, there were a few things that were forgotten about this. And the thing that Bama fans and whoever wrote Quentin Dial's Wikipedia page brought up, which if you haven't seen Quentin Dial's Wikipedia page, go look it up and go look up the recounting of this play that has become so iconic. If you Google Aaron Murray GIF, this is the first thing that comes up.
About it still.
So what happens is Aaron Murray throws this interception. And as you know, he's kind of gliding to the ball carrier and he's kind of following the play loosely, as quarterbacks often do in this spot.
I'm pretending to run to make this tackle.
Yeah, basically. And he's not necessarily near the play. It's not like he's making an actual attempt on the play. That's not necessarily even the problem. Quentin Dial comes in out of nowhere and just delivers the blindside of all blindside hits on Murray. And Murray just drops to the ground. The best thing about this, too, was that they had the perfect camera angle on Murray this entire time, so you could see the hit in slow motion. And that's what made this bad. It wasn't that Murray should have had his head on a swivel, no doubt about it. The fact that there's a lesson to be learned about that. I've been in that exact situation actually back in the day in high school special teams where I got absolutely clocked by somebody because I was just floating through a play.
Was it Quentin Dial?
My fault. It was Quentin Dial. He was there.
He's
it was
the
weird.
worst.
We're similar in age. The problem, though, is that it was a helmet-to-helmet hit, and he got him straight in the jaw. And before that, I think it was 2 possessions earlier, McCarron called for a late hit and basically begged. He begged for the ref to call this late hit on Georgia, and he got his way on that on a key play in the red zone. And Georgia fans are watching this going, how could they call the hit on Murray or call the hit on McCarron that extended that drive and then not call this play where they just flat out missed it? And they showed the replay a billion times. And, there might have been an official who was blocked from the line of sight.
That is what happened.
That is exactly what happened.
Spencer Tillman brought it up at the halftime show when Tim Brando brought up this.
How this would have been different now is they would have been able to take one look on replay.
But what's the change in events?
So it would be called a targeting penalty, and you would be able to review it, and you would be able to eject him from the game because it was a helmet-to-helmet hit.
Right. I get all that, but I'm saying Bama still keeps the ball. They might keep the ball within the first half.
Exactly.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So just to put a bow on it, from my perspective, that was the thing looking back that they couldn't even review it to be able to get, because if they had just given the 15-yard penalty, yes, Bama still has the interception, Bama still keeps possession,
right?
But that would have made Georgia fans feel a little bit better instead of looking back on this game and they're like, oh, we didn't get this call here, we didn't get this call there, and that's the big one that stands out where you're like, how could you not make this big of a call when it's a quarterback who gets decked like that?
Well, and I think the protecting the quarterbacks started to come a lot, not a lot later, but in the years after. Yep. And this was a penalty. I'll say it was a penalty. But when Georgia fans a lot of times have a tendency to hold on to one thing to blame for whether they won or lost.
This was not the difference in the game. You're right.
Why I got mad at you is because, and we'll get it later, but it's the one image that we'll always remember from this. This was in the second quarter, and I'm not saying it didn't weigh in, impact the outcome, but it's tell me a defensive lineman, in that situation, it's probably not going to have a helmet-to-helmet hit on the quarterback. But I'm saying, not really. They probably wouldn't have done. They shouldn't have done that, I guess. But Quentin Dial's a good guy.
Tell us your Quentin Dial story. You got to go.
See, this is why I get so bothered by it, because he got so vilified by Georgia fans about this cheap shot artist and all those other things. His Wikipedia page is ridiculous.
It's so funny. Please go read it. If you do it right now. Pause this podcast and go look at Quentin Dial's Wikipedia page. It's great.
We got some sirens coming in hot. So I was with him on his official visit to Bama. So 2008, I had a friend that was a Bama Bell. She got me and my dad tickets, or I guess passes. as a recruit, in quotes, to the Iron Bowl. So I got to go like on the field pregame and like go like with all the recruits, sit in the stands, like meet Saban, and it was like Trent Richardson, DJ Fluker, Drake Kirkpatrick, all those guys, and Quentin Dial was in our group. And so Quentin Dial, he lost his dad when he was little, or didn't have a relationship with him growing up. Him and my dad were just boys. They hit it off. We're hanging out the whole day. Super nice guy. I think they were like friends on Facebook. Like he
That's
was
so weird.
He was a really it really was. He was a really good guy. Whatever. I just don't think this play was that big of a deal.
It was bad because we had all we had that image of it where you could just see like Murray's eyes creep at the last second, and I can't believe that if we had more time with him at SEC Media Days last year, we would have asked him specifically about. I think we asked him off air.
Well, that's how I got the interview with him. Is he was like just walking down the street. I just came out of nowhere and just blindsided. I was like, "You're gonna do this interview."
But yeah, I mean that hit has just become such a lasting image.
It was a bad
game.
No call. I'll say it.
It was a bad no call. We can admit that in hindsight, but it was not where the game was decided. The other thing that I forgot about this game was just how bad McCarron was early on. I mean, like, had the fumble in Jarvis Jones where he like double clutched, and you're just like, dude, you got to be able to get rid of the ball in that spot. He throws the interception in the end zone to Sanders Cummings. Bad throw, and he blamed Amari Cooper for it. But it's like you weren't on the same page. But it was a bad throw to begin with. I don't even know if Amari makes a good adjustment on that ball where he thought it was going to, McCarron thought it was going to be a back shoulder thing. It looked like Cooper
he's bailed AJ out
fade.
so many times, not only in this game but this season. I rewatching this game, I totally understand why people hated AJ McCarron if you weren't a Bama fan.
A little bit. So, he just looked jumpy throughout it. And, Bama didn't even score until that long Lacy run with 2 minutes left in the second quarter. And the first 3 quarters of that game, really probably the first 3.5 quarters of that game, it's Lacy and Yeldon. Like, it's AJ McCarron, for as highly touted as he was nowhere to be found. And I get it, because why would you want to do that when you basically have one go-to receiver and you need single coverage on him to make anything happen?
Yeah, and I don't understand why Georgia ever went into single coverage mode against Amari Cooper. Because
should not have.
Because it's like, looking back on it now, it's like, I remember thinking, I was like, we have a really good receiving core. We just had pawns out there just pretending to like run out for routes. It was like, hey, either dump the ball off to a running back or just get it to Amari Cooper. He started out really bad. In the second half, I think, again, like, he wasn't a senior at this point. He was 26-2 as a starter, you said?
26-2, yeah.
Okay, so, and he'd won a national championship and played really well against LSU. But, like, that's the guy. That should have been the guy to lead you and be the calm presence in the huddle. And he's like, that happy feet he had, man. He was freaking out.
He was, that Georgia defense had him flustered early on. You look back, there was one play where like he had, it was like a 3-man rush or something like that. And it looked like the right side of it was kind of like wide open. I'm surprised they didn't even call like intentional grounding on this play. But he was in the pocket and he had nobody on his backside at all. But he just like felt the pressure, and he throws this ball up in the air. It looks like it was a 500 ball that he throws out of bounds. Like I said, don't know how it wasn't intentional grounding, but it was like, in hindsight, we have all the angles, we can see this. But if he had like turned around, he had like 15 yards of free space that he could have run with. And it wasn't until later on in the game where he started to be like, oh, I can actually like run up the middle, and the defense is not necessarily preparing for me to run, and I'm not going to get demolished if I hold on to the ball for more than 2 seconds.
He played that entire game like if you were walking outside like late at night and you're like, oh my God, is that a snake?
Yep.
No, you idiot, it's a garden hose. Like that's how he played most of that game. It was.
But the 2 throws were just so.
Yeah, well, but like, if you look the drive before that, the reason like on that 3rd down play, he dropped back and like immediately gives up on the play and tries to like run and gets like sacked. And then the only reason it was 3rd and 5 on that Yeldon play before the Amari Cooper touchdown is because he had yet another bad pass to the tight end, and then blamed the tight end for it.
Yeah, McCarron did that kind of a lot.
Cool ass tattoos though.
Cool sushi restaurant too.
Oh, God.
When did the losing team blow it? So when did Georgia? When was the moment that you realized? And the easy thing to do is just to point to the last play. And there's obviously a case to be made for that. Watching this back, if I had not known the final result, I would have been ready for the storyline of Aaron Murray finally having this big moment. But there are a couple different instances I think that you could point to, and I think we had the exact same one. So when Georgia is up, actually, they're up 3 with 6 minutes left. I
cannot believe you got this. I cannot believe you also saw this. I've never been more proud of you.
Georgia's up 3 with 6 minutes left. and it looks like Georgia's going to have this drive, wind down the clock. Bama's going to get maybe one more chance to get the lead. It's 3rd and 1 with Todd Gurley in your backfield. And Jesse Williams absolutely stuffs him. And Jesse Williams was the same guy who went down earlier with, I think it was the ankle or the knee injury.
So this is like peeling back a little bit. This is, I thought, the biggest impact player of the game, I thought, was potentially Jesse Williams. The reason why is because the defensive line wasn't great, like from Bama. And he was an All-American, and this guy was like a legend at Bama, All-American, had benched 600 pounds, like all this stuff. But again, when you talk about like the whole bravado and like we're tough and like can't be soft, Jesse Williams goes off the field, can't walk on his own power, is carried off the field. It's something with his knee. He's got like a towel over his head. It's like the start of the 3rd quarter, and it ended up having surgery immediately after the season.
Oh, you could tell he was still hurting.
Yeah, it was something. I don't think it was an ACL. I want to say it was like an MCL or something like that. But it was a serious injury. He comes back into the game in the 4th quarter for this play. He had 3 tackles, including this play, and also to be lead blocker on the touchdown pass to start the 4th quarter.
Right. Yeah. Just an unbelievable display of toughness in that moment. I thought, because if Gurley picks up the first down there,
that's over.
Georgia's got a 3-point lead. They could wind down at least another you at least force Bama to use all their timeouts, and maybe you take another 2-3 minutes off the clock easily, and you're probably going to be in somewhat favorable field position.
You can't run the football.
Maybe get a field goal.
If you run the clock down,
exactly.
So the way this game played out in the 3rd quarter, especially, and I brought up the DJ Fluker thing, where it was like this moment of like, run behind me, let's go, and even Danielson brought it up. He's like, he's very emotional right now. We all are, Gary. We all are. But like they go on this stretch where they don't attempt. I think they had 3 passes they attempted, or I'm sorry, before the Amari Cooper throw, they'd only attempted 2 passes in like the last like 17 plays. And you have this moment where they're like, Bama is finally coming back. They get ahead, and you see these Bama teams before. That's when they put teams away. And Bama had no answer for Gurley at all. And Aaron Murray's playing out of his mind, hitting Tavares King on like a huge 41-yard bomb like the next drive after Bama takes the lead. I've never seen a Bama team like that comes from behind. Like you feel like, oh, good, the good guys won. No, Georgia kept coming right back and right back. And yeah, I think if they get the first down there, this game is over.
Tavares King every time he made a big time catch, it looked like he was just going to die on the field. I felt bad. Like he took some shots,
really
man.
Did, man. And I forgot how good Malcolm Mitchell was too. That and Arthur Lynch, like Aaron Murray. It's not enough is made about how incredible of a job he did in this game.
He didn't have an Amari Cooper to throw to, and his top 2 receivers were out with injuries in this game. That's another thing that I forgot rewatching this. And he didn't have that guy on the outside where he's not like he's throwing to an AJ Green or something like that. Somebody who could just go up and make a play for him.
Right.
Which I thought there were moments in this game, moments in the 4th quarter where he just needed that. He needed to be able to say, look, I can recognize at the line of scrimmage, I've got single coverage on the outside. I can throw it to any place that I want. Even like what we talked about before with Steven Garcia doing with Alshon, where he's like, I'm just going to trust my guy to go make a play. I'll throw it 20 yards ahead, line of scrimmage. He's going to beat his guy,
right.
And it's going to be an easy first down. He didn't have that.
But he did everything in his power to win the game. And what's unfair about this is like we look at, again, with AJ, and I'm not just trying to discount AJ's career, but AJ had the benefit of playing with a defense that team in 2011 gave up 8 points a game. This team gave up like 11. Aaron Murray's having to go out here and constantly battle back because you have a 21-10 lead halfway through the 3rd quarter, and Grantham, for whatever reason, cannot figure out how to stop the run off right tackle.
They're just running right at Jarvis Jones.
But I mean, like he had no help on the defensive side of the ball in this game.
Yeah, they were gassed too by the end. The only thing that AJ McCarron could have asked for, the only thing better in terms of a support system, I was going to say like a kicking game, but
my God, Cade Foster.
Yeah. It's not a classic Bama game unless you have a few kicking miscues.
I will never forget that kid being a 3-star kicker recruit, Cade Foster. He hit like a 57-yarder in high school, and he also had 3 scholarship offers as a linebacker. And my dad was like blown away by that. And he's like, you know what that means? Saban always thinking ahead, man. Extra tackler on the field on kickoffs. No, you know what that means? He's just not a good kicker. He's not. He's a big, bulky, strong kicker, but he's not a good kicker.
Oh gosh! All right, here's the question that Georgia fans have asked many, many, many times. I'm sure they have. What would have happened afterwards if the result was flipped?
This isn't even hypothetical.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, let's say that Murray does have that last second touchdown drive. Georgia wins this game. Mark Richt gets carried off the field. Georgia's going to a national championship. First time playing in a national championship since 1983 rather, the final year of Herschel.
82, like January 1st, 83.
Right. So the final year of Herschel would have been the last time that they had been there. There's no doubt in my mind that Georgia ends the title drought. They destroy Notre Dame in the championship. Knowing what we know now about the weaknesses that Notre Dame
how many other teams would have.
It's an interesting question because obviously they won all those games like really close. Like would Florida have won against Notre Dame? Probably. I mean, they're not to take anything away from an 11-0 start because it's still really hard to do. And
definitely takes away from that.
But I think you look. That's the most frustrating thing. And if you were a Georgia fan watching that national championship, you're just watching what the thing that slipped away and how frustrating that is. Much like it's almost like the James Harden Rockets teams that lost in Game 7 to the Warriors last year.
Yeah, but this one actually matters.
Yeah, this one a little bit more significant.
I don't think the city of Houston's like starved. Well, I mean, I guess they literally aren't because they've had the titles before. This is for Georgia fans, man. They're such a passionate fan base, and it's so easy to look back on stuff and be like, well, if this would have happened, like I do it all the time in 2013. Like, well, if the kick six didn't happen, Bama would have won the national championship. I don't know that because then they would have still had to beat a really good Florida State team. Like, but it's easy to say these hypotheticals. Like, if this one play didn't happen, we would have won the national championship. Where Bama, go ahead.
I'll set the over/under at Gurley rushing yards in the national championship.
Oh my God,
250.
Well, and I've told you this before. You remember like the pregame meeting or the national championship meeting with it was Nussmeier the OC and Kirby Smart the DC, and Nussmeier walks in and he's like him and Saban didn't really get along, and he kind of had this arrogance. This is his first year as the OC. And he's like, how many points do you need? And he was like, what? He's like, how many points do you need? And he's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, they have nothing for us on defense. Nothing. And that was the exact quote. They have nothing for us. And they didn't. And again, it's usually easy to sit here and be like, well, this team should have been in it or this team would have won if this happened. Georgia, hands down, would have won the national championship. And to be honest, with the way that the end of that game was going and the way that I saw I want to give Georgia so much credit because in this game, this is the first time I'd really felt like there's like a chink in the armor because Bama couldn't put this team away. Every single time they finally came back, Georgia came right back. Just came right back. And I think if they spike the ball, they have those 2/3 of the end zone. You have a player like Aaron Murray, who's the most efficient passer in the country, and they had just torched Bama's defense for most of the second or that drive. Man, I think they scored and they probably win.
That's the biggest regret of the final drive is that Murray didn't spike it immediately, and in that moment,
he's motioning to do it.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, that just wasn't the play. And they wanted to get one off, and they thought, okay, we're still going to be able to get 2 plays off either way. Let's just go keep them on the on their.
I think Grantham
heels.
was the one that called it. should we clock it? No, blitz. Coach, we're literally on offense. We cannot blitz. Just do it, Aaron.
I'm glad you brought up Kirby because we've probably not talked about him enough maybe in this.
Traitor.
But the interesting question is, what would have happened if the result was flipped?
Man.
Kirby, who helped beat Mark Richt, probably never replaces Mark Richt at Georgia. Because think about this. If Richt wins a national championship that year, he got 3 years after this, and the narrative around Richt would have changed significantly.
Huge. Can't win the big game to this.
He got 3 more seasons after that. They started at number 5 in 2013, the following season, which was pretty crazy considering what they lost the NFL draft. That was the highest ranking that they had for the rest of his time at Georgia. So they never got back into the top 5 after that. And if you have that national championship, and if you end this long streak, and you're viewed in the same regard as like a Vince Dooley, except maybe even better because the stuff probably around it, and the way that Dooley kind of faded towards the end, you have built in this grace period where you can afford a couple dud seasons because you brought Georgia that title.
And no offense, I'm not saying this in a condescending way to Georgia fans, but a grace period? They had already given him a grace period. Imagine how long the grace period would have lasted if he won the national championship. And you have to really emphasize the way that season played out and the narrative that was already in place with Richt was, he doesn't do the little things to win games. Like he was constantly, Georgia was towards the top as the most penalized team in the SEC. And Richt just could never change it. He had all the offseason rest. There were so many negative associations with him as a coach, but he kind of just kept sliding by because can't win the big game, but he's a great guy. And look where the program is compared to where it was under Don and Ray Goff and all those kind of things. But, man, they had a very long leash with him for a long time. And if he would have beat Florida, a rival they have a lot of trouble with, who was a top 5 team, then beat Alabama, who had just won 2 or 3 national championships, and then beats a team like Notre Dame, who was undefeated, and beats them the way Bama did, which they would have.
Statue.
Yeah. And you talk about, like, that narrative changes so quickly to him not being able to win the big game and all these negative things to this guy who's one of the best coaches, and everyone already holds in high regard, is also, like, one of the elite college football coaches in the country. Is he up there with Saban? That's what the talk would have been.
You brought up this after the game, too, about how Richt we talked about this a little bit off air, about you could kind of tell he realized that this was his opportunity and it slipped away, and maybe a little bit more snippy than usual with the media.
Well, and throughout the game, he was even way more emotional than I've ever seen him during the game. And it was almost sad because I noticed it when I rewatched it last night, and it was almost sad to watch because it was like you did get the feeling that he knew, like, this is the best chance we have. We're so close. We're so close. And after the game, Chuck Long from Atlanta's King CFB on Twitter, he asked the question, which was, there are some people, whether it's fans, media, or whomever, that will maybe want to make further conclusions about you or your quarterback, specifically in big games. Would you have any response to those people? It's like the most vague, long-winded sentence. And Rick just snaps back at him very uncharacteristically. I don't know what you're saying. Why don't you just say it straight up to what you're trying to say? And then to his credit, he did. He said, well, people say that you and Aaron Murray specifically come up short on the biggest stage against the biggest opponents. And that sucks to even read.
I get it from both perspectives, too, about having to ask that question in that moment after you have all this talent on that team and you come so close. And at the same time, I get why Rick would be frustrated because that's a tough pill to swallow, to realize that team came up short in that moment when you had him. I mean, you're in the red zone, you're right there, and a chance to have this big iconic win. It was all there. And
some frustrations probably too with like, man, like, what do I have to do to like get to this point? And like Bama, who again didn't play in the conference championship the year before, gets to the national championship and wins. And that 2017, everyone knew that Georgia was the best team in the country.
5 years earlier, Bama's a dumpster fire. And here they are in shape to go on to their third national championship.
But then also that same year, that 2007 game, because I think that was a big part of like what could have been in his legacy. Not only were they a 2-loss team, they didn't make it to their conference championship, so they didn't make it to the national championship. They watched a 2-loss team from their conference win the national championship.
It's tough. It's really tough. So the other question to ask is how much, and it's tough. This is going to be really, really tough to answer. But how much different is the Alabama dynasty without getting to the national championship and ultimately beating Notre Dame? Because yes, you still have 2 national championships in a 4-year stretch, but at that point, 3 out of 4 is it's an unbelievable accomplishment that I don't know if we're going to see. I mean, technically we could see it if Clemson wins it all this year.
What the hell, bro?
Sorry. Okay. I had to get you honest. We've had a lot of positive Bama talk. I had to kind of knock you back down to earth a little bit. But how much different are we viewing Saban and this run of dominance where that team just they define the decade in college football, the decade of dominance that we talk about so much. And the thing that's tough to answer is Saban, after he loses, turns into a different coach.
God, you're so on point, man.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's the tough thing to look at it because it's, again, looking back on it, I foolishly thought that like 2012 team was one of the most dominant teams ever because on paper you kind of thought they were supposed to be. They were not. They were not. Like, I mean, that offensive line, that running game was good. That defense was just so much worse than some of the other defenses under Saban and Smart. But I mean, you talk about like coming off a loss, he is a lot better, and they had a lot of talent coming back in 2013. But I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens in, the kick six. I don't know if that plays into like the next year at all because it's such a crazy fluke year the following season. But I will say that now you have the talk being like Saban lost in a national championship game. Mm-hmm. He won the national title despite winning his own conference the year before. He won his first national championship when Colt McCoy got injured. So that's interesting. Easy ways to like really, kind of water down his accomplishments. And then also you're talking about Georgia being 4-1 now in their last 5 games against Bama.
True.
And the only loss is that blackout game. And so it's, and I wonder if the power maybe shifts a little bit.
It's such a just a fascinating crossroads game in the SEC, and I think it's shaped things that have played out 7 years from now that we're still talking about this day, about how different those teams could have gone on just such different paths. I think there's a good chance that Rick is still at Georgia if he wins that game.
Without a doubt.
As crazy as it is.
Without a doubt.
But who knows? Georgia, maybe if they win a national championship this year, this is the type of game that they could look back on and have a little bit of an easier time accepting, knowing that in an indirect way it probably led to Kirby going to Athens, and just such a wild ripple effect type game. What's the play or the image that we're always going to remember when thinking about this?
Oh man, for me, it's hard not to. All right. Obviously, the last drive is pretty crazy, but for me, it will always be the first thing I think of is that 3rd and 5 play with Yeldon, because in that moment, to run off tackle on 3rd and 5 and to make contact with the one guy who was the loudest voice about this whole, we're not soft and this tough bravado thing, that play is the one that sticks out for me. But the Murray signaling to Rick to spike the ball. And then Rick not afterwards saying we just ran out of time in the press conference. No, blank.
Yeah, I think he just didn't want to, put blame on a specific player or something like that in that spot. And I think he trying to hold back his words a little bit.
That awkward celebration thing, though, that was, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, I threw in here the Quentin Dial hit on Murray. It's maybe the most, not necessarily the play that defined that game, but just in terms of if you think about that's the most the single image that I remember most, just because Aaron Murray is somebody that we've talked about a lot on the podcast and stuff like that. So just kind of this moment of his career that was just so frustrating. But the image that I think will be most that I'll take away most is just watching Murray stunned at the end, where we talk about Rick realizing
what do I
that
have
moment
to
slipped
do?
away. Just how can I get over this hump? And I thought I had finally done the things I needed to do. People can criticize me all they want for the 1-4 mark in top 10 games, but against this Bama defense, I came ready to play. And ultimately we came up short yet again in such a crushing way down the stretch, where he probably, and everybody in that Georgia sideline probably thought, this is his time. This is when he's going to really cement his legacy, as Gary Danielson said. And just watching him, where he takes his helmet off immediately and his mouth just drops open, and then he pretty much sprints right into the tunnel. And I never got an explanation kind of what his thinking was. At first, when you saw it on TV, it actually looked like he was running after the refs to ask him about something, but he ran right past him. So I don't think that was the case.
No, I mean, he was one of the more.
It was weird.
He was I don't want to say gracious loser is not the best way to put it. That sounds condescending, but he was he seemed like he had such a good, measured, calm presence about him. He didn't get overly emotional in the moment. That was painful to rewatch that. And so to be honest, peeling back again, as being around Georgia fans, this is going to be it sounds sad, but I remember when they were losing to teams like Florida nonstop, and they in the mid 2000s or whatever, and they couldn't get over that hump. And Florida obviously is with these national championships. I remember working with a guy one time who was like, man, after that Florida game last night, I just went home and watched Aaron Murray highlights for 2.5 hours drinking, that's sad. Don't ever do that, guys. But the reason I bring that up is because people were so excited for him to come in. He was a 5-star recruit. He was a huge get for them. And they also had Bettenberger in that class. But started as a freshman, put up just ridiculous. He was the guy. He was, again, Georgia fans have a tendency, and not just UGA, but the state in general, to hitch their wagon to one guy. And Aaron Murray was that guy for 2 or 3 seasons. And
when we asked, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. So it was one of those things where, you had all of this hype for so long coming into the season of what he was able to do in high school, and then steps in right away and is a good quarterback.
Great quarterback.
Yeah, and it just to have the career he had and have it be kind of cheapened by saying he never won a championship, he couldn't win the big one. Man, he did a lot of things for that program.
He might have had the ultimate but career. And when we asked him, last night I listened back to the interview that we did with him at SEC Media Days, and you asked him the question, what's the greatest accomplishment of your life, of your career? And he said, just being a 4-year starter at Georgia. And the stuff that he did, the numbers that he put up, yes,
he loved Georgia, man.
And it's so interesting to think about what could have been had he gotten that one play. But
he just got married at the stadium a couple weeks ago. Not at the stadium, but that's where all of his their pre-wedding pictures were taken.
we need to revisit with him. Hopefully we'll reconnect with him in Birmingham. But I think that's enough torture for Georgia fans for this day. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this. Even Georgia fans could enjoy listening to this. This was a lot of fun. We're going to hopefully roll out, the plan, tentatively speaking, is to roll out a few more of these, maybe like early August or so. It just kind of depends. But next week we will be back to doing our normal regular pods. We potentially could have a special guest. That is still in the works. We're not going to say who it is yet.
Crossed.
This has been a long time coming to get this guest to come on, but our goal is to be able to bring him on. We've got a few logistics to work out, but hopefully we'll bring you that. So,
and guys, let us know on, like, especially in the Facebook group, all those kind of things.
Yes.
This is the first time that we've done this. We were both
new.
very, very excited to do it. I hope you guys liked it, and it didn't come off as me just being like, man, I had the best time of my life in that game, man. It was crazy. Because we really
you held it together. You held it together really well.
I tried my best. I honestly, going back looking at it, I forgot how much better Georgia was that day for a lot of the time. But anyway, what games do you guys want us to discuss? What games are not just classics, but like the most rewatchable, entertaining games that even if you're not a fan of one of the teams, like what was the most enjoyable game you could watch? We don't have to do the kick six.
It's got to be pre-playoff era, I think, and then just because this was there are a lot of games that you could pick with Bama where Bama wins the title or something like that. We can branch out of that zone.
Bama. No, for real. I'd rather give a chance for fan bases from other teams and stuff like that. But if you guys have any suggestions or comments, concerns, I don't know, advice, hit us up in the Facebook group, SCS Podcast. Let us know what you think and give us some feedback, because we only do this for you guys.
We do it all for you. We do it all for y'all. Coach O, can we get an "it just meant more" from you? Is that too much to ask?
I need you to spike the damn ball.
Way too soon.
It just meant more.
Talk to you guys next week.